To the question and answer part, please keep your questions short, and let's see how much time we're going to have to see if we can ask maybe more than one question. So anybody have Hossein? Yes.
So I have a basic question regarding the comparison between the film industry in the US and in Canada. I know that in terms of size and they are not comparable. My question is specifically about the fact that you mentioned that like the Canadian government's policy is forcing everybody to come to Toronto to make the movies. My perception was like most of the movies in the US are even shot in California or in New York. Is it like in the US it's distributed all over the country?
That's right, yeah. Yeah, and that's the difference, is that the studio system in the US grew up in California. Here we don't have a studio system, although we are moving towards it. The studios are based in Toronto. Because our films are all dependent upon government support. The idea, back when we were richer, when the world was richer, it was possible to disseminate the money across Canada, because we are a country of distinct regions, very distinct regions, and there has been a theory proposed that in fact North America would make better sense if, rather than a divide across this way, we divided, with the division this way, we divided, so there would be a Pacific state or province, and there would be a Midwestern state or province, and then there would be a central, and then the East Coast. I never want to be American. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. I'm sure with that.
But you know, it's so that's. I think it's sad because I've lived in Vancouver. I've lived in Halifax. I've worked with people, you know, in Vancouver, in Alberta, in Halifax and St. John's, Newfoundland, and I know what the talent is, and I know that they have distinct voices. They have distinct approaches to the world that's different from Toronto and Montreal. And I just think that it will ultimately make a banal cinema. It will make an industrial cinema, and that's what the government is pushing for, is that it is no longer an art. It is an industry, pure and simple, where it makes its money back.
Same as US.
That's right.
Most pictures do not make their money back, just for the record. Most films. I hear about the ones that do, but it is not true that Americans
That's
know
right.
how to make money.
They don't. They know how to market.
Yeah.
That's the hugest difference between Canadian cinema and American cinema. Telefilm's entire budget was $100 million per year. It was cut 2 years ago, over 3 years, by over 10 million. So it's down to about $85 million a year to make movies and to run the business. So there's maybe $30 million, $40 million total to make movies in Canada. Any American film will spend that amount on marketing the film alone, just marketing. So how can we compete? You know, I think that it's wrong for us to think that we can, or that we should. We should be finding what's distinct and unusual in our stories and be making them, and then supporting them to get out to cinemas. I have a radical theory, this is me being crazy, but rather than putting money into any more $20 or $30 million films, telefilm should be starting agreements with certain independent cinemas where they provide financing for those cinemas in return for showing the films and assisting the marketing, because that's the only way I think our cinema will really survive.
Okay, thank you. We go to the Jose. Go ahead. Yes.
My second short question was, I guess, like my perception is it's not because like Canadian industry or Canadians, they don't know how to market. I guess that's because the aims are different. I mean, in US, as you said, it's an industry, but in Canada necessarily, I mean, I know who doesn't want to earn money, but as you said, the aim is not to compete with US industry. So.
But we do, because our cinemas are owned by the American majors, you know. Maybe we know how to market. We aren't good as a nation at selling ourselves. We sell ourselves short all the time, and I think that mentality is exhibited in the way that we market our movies.
Sure, of course, very quick.
We went to see The Disappeared, which was playing at the Carlton. It was a Canadian film shot in Nova Scotia. And I commented, I go to the Carlton a lot, and I commented to Jamie that I hadn't seen the trailer. She said there was no trailer. There was no money to make the trailer. So, you know, they know that you need a trailer if you're going to sell a film. And the fact that the government can invest in making a film with no trailer is amazing. I mean, that's the state of things. And it was an excellent film.
In fact, I wanted to invite you, if this series leaves you with any kind of appetite to see more Canadian movies, Telefilm Canada has a catalog on its website. But also perhaps better is the First Weekend Club. It's a website. First Weekend Club is a club that assists the release of Canadian films on the first weekend, because in order for a film to stay stay more than 1 week in the cinema, the decision is made on the first weekend on the number of people who go to see it on that very first Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So if not enough people go to see it on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that film is removed on Thursday. So I invite you to check out First Weekend Club, and also follow at the Carlton. That's where Canadian films will be shown more than likely. And there are one of the things I didn't mention that we were talking about earlier is that this was a first feature. This was the first time he had directed a feature film. And we have a tremendous history of excellent first feature films. In Halifax, I worked on 2 films that were first feature films that were ultimately shortlisted for the Directors' Fortnight at Cannes. One was programmed for the Sundance Film Festival. One was named to the Toronto International Film Festival Best 10 Canadian Films of the Year. And another one made it to number 4 on the iTunes download list. First feature film. So there's good talent. There are good films being made. You have to hunt for them, sadly. They're just not advertised.
Thank you. Okay, next question, Cyrus.
I'm just curious, historically, because the film doesn't show that, was he really historically popular with people?
Yeah, that's the amazing thing, is that...
And if he was, why don't we know the reason why he was? And then if he wasn't, then why would the movie make him popular? I just don't get it.
Well, I think that it's his manners, it's his gentlemanliness. Is that he was always polite. He saw the little boy looking at the oranges, and he went in and bought an orange for the little boy. It was those kinds of actions that he apparently did a lot, but also because there was this myth about him that he, like Robin Hood, only robbed from the rich. And the second part of your question was why we don't...
You said he was. I was thinking if he wasn't, then why would the film... But you answered.
Yeah.
Thank you. Amir is next. Amir.
Yes. Thanks for your presentation. I just have your discussions raised some questions in my mind, especially when you compare this movie with traditional Western in Hollywood. because I'm not very sure that is against the mainstream, because I see many of the Western is based mostly on dual position, binary positions between, for example, civilization and culture, freedom versus restriction, or nature versus culture, or woman versus men, or inside society versus outside society. I see so many of these in this movie. I see these inside societies want to protect him against the U.S. who are coming. I see the same similarity between woman and man. You talks about the fact that the woman character is very different. I do not believe it's very different. We have similar type of woman in Johnny Guitar, I think. Johnny Guitar, we have a strong female in that movie, which was quite big, very before this movie. If I want to think of, for example, the women who are breaking the rules, I'm maybe thinking more of Unforgiven, for example.
Yeah.
The guys who paid these cowboys to come and get vengeance. Or I'm thinking of mixed cut off Claire Reinker. So I have a little bit still difficulty to accept the claim that it is anti-Western, because I do not believe it's breaking many of traditions. I think at his own time there was other directors like Altman, who was playing very good with genres and creating main anti-conventional Western movie in the U.S. I'm just want to know.
Okay. When I talk about conventional films, Westerns, I think about the John Ford, High Noon, Cooper, Gary Cooper, John Wayne. In fact, Unforgiven to me is not a traditional Western, because the hero, think about the first scene. What is the hero doing? He's not riding into town.
Yes, I totally agree that it's not conventional movie Unforgiven. Yes.
Oh, okay. I missed you. You were using that. And Johnny Guitar, because of the strong female character, I've never considered it as a traditional Western either. When I talk about a traditional Western, I talk about the gunslinger, the hero who's going to come and save the town, or drive the good guys out of town. The division between good and evil, civilization and non-civilization, is much more clearly defined in a traditional Western. Here, it's blurred. We've got a guy who's a hero, but he's a robber. He's a thief who's spent most of his life in prison. That's not a hero. So he's an anti-hero. So for me, that's non-traditional.
Yes, but why do you think of Wild Bunch, for example?
I don't think that's a traditional Western either.
No.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm saying it's really not traditional. Like, people
Yeah.
didn't, Wild Bunches, that's why you know it exists now.
Yeah.
The traditionals were ones that thousands of people went and watched and repeat.
Can we forget?
Yeah, yeah.
I think one of the easiest ways to identify it as not traditional is the way the Canadian West was not traditional. In America, when you got to the West, it was the Wild West because there was no police force. There was a sheriff, he was good or he was bad. But the thing that differentiated Canada is that the Mounties preceded the settlers. They didn't come afterwards. And so you always had this very orderly West. There was never a shoot-'em-out Western place in Canada the way there was in the United States historically. And so it makes this film, very different. It's very Canadian, the fact that the Mounties are all there and they're all got the hats on. You would never see that in the States. A police force in a Western film.
Yeah, so it's much more, the traditional Western is much more individual focused, individualistic. It's about the strength of the individual, and that's the American mythos.
That's America.
Thank you. Okay, we have room for two more questions. Arash and then Payman. Arash.
I just wanted to comment on the Canadian discussion to see what you think, because unlike what people think, and all the jokes that I make about Canada, there is actually something behind them. I don't have like blind. And I think what you said at the beginning is actually very indicative of the problem, and in relation to the film as well. I mean, look, you said, for example, you spoke about how Canadians, have heroes that they don't know about it, which is an interesting sentence, because the presumption of having a Canadian hero as opposed to a hero is that people do know about it. Like, I mean, that's what being a national hero means, right? Countries much smaller than Canada. It's not about the size. Countries much smaller have a myriad of heroes who are known around the world. 5.5 million people, live in Denmark. Danish heroes are known around the world, right? So it's not a matter of size. Canada is a relatively big country, actually, especially if you look at it economically. So that issue of sort of heroes who are not known is, I think, directly related to why the portrayal of a hero in a film is sort of apologetic. I mean, I was charmed by the guy. I think this is my kind of male hero. When I write, I mean, he has the kind of a Stalin mustache too, so that's all. Him being a hero is not fleshed out, right? Not that much. Although the scene in the end is really beautiful, I thought. But this basically what I'm trying to say and link it to the discussion about Canadian cinema is that, well, why is it that there is no heroes? It's related to the fact, to the central problem, and that I think Canada has and brings it to the cinema as well, that to be Canadian doesn't, except for the July 1st and the barbecue, doesn't mean a lot to the most people who live in this land, who have very strong regional identities, but not only also regional, non-collective identities, I would even say, their family, their community, and all that. To an American, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln means something. You cannot find a really single Canadian figure. Tommy Douglas is a very divisive figure. The liberals in Globe and Mail might like him, but if you can't.
Could you just ask your question?
Just to bring it down, I think. So when you talk about the Canadian films, and I think one theme of this series has been the issue of sort of Canadian films, and their sort of rise and fall. I think if this discussion is related to that, because the fact of the matter is, vast majority of Canadians not only don't go to see Canadian films, actively joke about not going to Canadian films, right? And this is not an accident, right? And I think it's related to the fact that how much this country has been unable really to define itself against, it's a result of a historical accident that the American war didn't come up, north enough to conquer, and you can't only define yourself in relation to what in a sort of to United States. So I think that's related to the fact that Canadian cinema has not been able to find an audience. And if you can't find an audience, there's so much government money and schemes that can be put on a thing, but it just doesn't happen.
Okay, your comment? Any comment on this?
No,
You agree? Okay, yes. Connie, yes.
I think it's very well known that America exercises a hegemony in Canada culturally. I mean, we drive American cars, and we all know who Martha Stewart is, and it's everywhere. And this is the very challenge.
Yeah, and it has been the challenge. I mean, Margaret Atwood, Surfacing Survival, talking about Canadian identity 50 years ago. I think that we have come to a place where we as Canadians know who we are, we understand what our culture is, it's just not overt to explain how we're different. I mean, I don't want to say I'm more polite than an American. I don't think that's true. We have national health care. I don't know, but yeah.
Okay, kind of the thing is, sorry for cutting you, but we would have this in the discussion forum, and this camera seems to have some memory. So we will go to the questions, and then in the discussion section we will continue. Because
Taping it
seems yes, of course. Payman, make it very short. Yes.
I forgot the process.
Actually, this is a really interesting discussion about the Canada, what is not about the movie. I really love that. I have a separate session time about the Canada identity. So about the movie, I was expecting to see really a visualistic capturing movie, but I mean I guess that was lost from the original film to the
VHS.
to this. So that was unfortunate. And as you said, the shadows, it was annoying actually when I watched
Yeah.
it.
I think it was off-putting, and
Yeah.
it made it much more difficult to engage, to enjoy and appreciate.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And also the sound was also very bad. I don't know, because if I compare this movie, which was made in 82, right? 1982, to the Iranian movie that was made at that time, Iranian movie has a better technique.
Yeah.
So it was really, I mean, I think that was happened, I don't know about the original movie, maybe it happens during this conversion that they played.
I think it is. I
Yeah.
honestly believe it
The
is.
sound
yeah.
is good.
Okay, yeah. So, but the other thing that about the character I said I cannot relate is that most likely the character were not developed well. For someone that spent from 16, he was 16 years old and started like a stagecoach robbery, and he spent 30 years, 33 years in prison. How come a person that spent is most like during the adults or during his young age in prison becomes such an articulate, polite, and sophisticated person? So it was not believable. That's why I said I can't relate to the character. Or for example, the Shorty, the guy that helped me, we don't understand what was his merit that he chose this guy, because apparently the Gary Fox, he was a sophisticated person, so he wants to have smart people around him. The guy Shorty, and he was not somebody that loved power and control. He doesn't look like. But Shorty was the type of person that wants to be controlled. So I don't believe that character really wants to work with this guy. So that's why I can't believe those characters could exist in real life.
Yeah. I'm going to say that you are quite correct, that the characters weren't well developed, and that's due to the lack of a source of antagonism. You develop good, strong characters in 3 dimensions when you give them something to push against, to fight against. You give them a clear goal that they have to struggle to get to. In fact, Bill Miner notoriously worked with dumb people, less clever than he was.
Yeah.
And I think probably because it was easy for him to control.
But the movie doesn't tell you that why. That's why there's a disconnect.
It's suggested when Jack Budd looks down at Shorty at the horse, and Shorty's playing with putting his hat on the horse, and he says, "Still working with idiots, I see." You know, if you know the story of Bill Miner, then you know that this was, it's a reference to the fact that he found these people.
But those were some snippets of
exactly.
the actual story, but we don't quite understand in this character. It was not believable.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question, because I know that we could have the rest of in the discussion section. So Ahmed, you're the last person. Yes. You don't have a question. Okay, we can go to Amir. Amir, your last question is.
I just wanted to continue Aresh's comments on why there is lack of good characterization or strong characters. I think this is also happening because Canada is not very famous to have good actors with fame or celebrity. When I'm thinking of, for example, John Wayne's, the huge things that happening around his lives, the magazine that talks always about his lives, the paparazzi who are coming and creating stories, lots of journals talking about him. All of this creates an aura surrounding somebody's, and when you don't have such characteristics with them, the people here can relate. When they do not know who is, for example, John Wayne, it also impacts on the way that you create a strong, because not all of the characters in United States coming from their history or background. Some of them are the direct results of the actors and the personality that he has created in fiction movies, and which is, I think, is something that's missing also in Canada.
Yeah, we don't have a star system,
No.
and increasingly, films, in order to get financed, have to bring in foreign stars. So we're going back to the practices of the capital, the tax shelter years, because we don't have a star system. We do, you know, we're starting to have, I think, television stars. And in Quebec, there's much more fluidity. The TV stars work in movies and you know, back and forth, and they work in live theater. But in Canada, we just don't have it. For a number of reasons, I think. But.
Okay, very well. Let's give a round of applause to her. Very good. Yes.